From the outside, it was a picture of a perfect life, a luxurious high-rise, a successful power couple, and two beautiful daughters who wanted for nothing. For 4-year-old Paulette, her world was one of big girl beds, matching pajamas, and the gentle hum of nannies ensuring her safety. But behind the facade of privilege and care, something vital was missing: a connection, an empathy, a mother's instinct. When the morning sun spilled into her room, the space where she should have been sleeping was just empty. And in the haunting silence that followed, the only thing more disturbing than her disappearance was the chillingly calm reaction of the two people who should have been shattered. The search that followed would capture a nation's attention, only to end in a way no one could have ever predicted. Paulette Guevara Farah came into the world on July 20, 2005, in Mexico City. Those who knew her often described her as gentle and full of charm. She enjoyed simple joys, like horses, dancing, and dressing up, things that lit up her young world. She also had an older sister just a few years ahead of her, and the two shared a close connection. Her parents, 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭 and Mauricio, came from accomplished backgrounds. 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭 had built a name for herself in the legal field, while Mauricio was active in real estate. Their wedding years earlier had been a grand occasion, a reflection of their standing and lifestyle. Paulette's arrival, however, came much sooner than expected. She was born very early and weighed less than 2 pounds. At first, there were serious concerns about her survival, but against all odds, she made it through. Though she continued to face developmental challenges, struggles with walking and speaking, her progress was considered remarkable. She'd already surpassed what many believed possible, and her family celebrated her resilience every step of the way. Paulette and her family lived in a high-rise apartment in an upscale area of 𝐀𝐫𝐜𝐬𝐿. To help with day-to-day routines, the family employed 2 longtime caregivers, sisters named Erica and Martha, who had been part of the household for nearly 7 years. On March 21, 2010, Paulette, her sister, and their father returned home after spending a few days in Valle de Bravo. Her mother, 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭, had been away on a separate trip with a friend, but had already come back by the time they arrived. That evening, 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭 spent time with her daughters, helping them settle in for the night. But before we begin, I just want to say thank you to my amazing viewers and subscribers. Your support through likes, shares, and comments means the world to me. Your engagement helps make these stories even more meaningful. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join our growing community of true crime enthusiasts. She guided Paulette into her newly purchased big girl bed, a change the family was still adjusting to, since Paulette had only slept there a few times. To ensure her comfort and safety, 𝐂𝐨𝐵 placed supportive pillows on either side of the bed before turning off the lights and wishing her daughter good night. The following morning, March 22nd, the family's caregivers followed their usual routine, helping Paulette's older sister get ready for school and sending her off on the bus around 7 a.m. Not long after, one of the nannies, Erica, went to check on Paulette. To her surprise, the little girl wasn't in her bed. Because Paulette typically needed assistance with mobility, Erica immediately felt concerned. She quickly informed her sister, Martha, and together they searched throughout the apartment. When they couldn't find her there, they expanded their search to the common areas of the building, including the hallways, garden, and pool. But there was still no sign of her. At that point, the nannies notified 𝐂𝐨𝐵 and Mauricio. Accounts later shared suggest that Mauricio had already gone into work while 𝐂𝐨𝐵 was at home. According to testimony given later, the parents did not appear to react with the same level of urgency that the caregivers expected. Erica recalled continuing to search while noticing 𝐂𝐨𝐵 sitting calmly nearby and Mauricio checking a closet without much alarm. What raised even more questions was that, rather than immediately contacting authorities, Mauricio first called his sister to explain the situation. It was she who ultimately reached out to the police, officially setting the investigation in motion. When authorities arrived at the family's apartment, they began a careful search of the home. Yet, despite looking in every possible space, there was still no sign of 4-year-old Paulette. Investigators noted that nothing in the apartment appeared out of place. There were no indications of a struggle, no forced entry, and no obvious explanation for how she could have left. Her room was located on the second floor, making it very unlikely that someone could have accessed it through the window. 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭 and Mauricio both stated that they hadn't heard anything unusual during the night, and even the family's dogs hadn't reacted in a way that might suggest a disturbance. Adding to the mystery, the apartment complex was equipped with security cameras both inside and outside the building. After carefully reviewing the footage, investigators saw no evidence of Paulette leaving the property after returning home on the 21st. With no signs of an intruder, no disturbances caught on camera, and no clear explanation for her disappearance, investigators were left with a troubling question. If Paulette hadn't left the apartment, then where was she?
That same afternoon, authorities released a poster with Paulette's photo and description, asking the public to assist in the search. The case quickly gained national attention, and even the Attorney General at the time, Alberto Basbas, became directly involved. The search effort was extensive. On the very first day, investigators returned to the family's apartment multiple times, even bringing in specially trained dogs. Meanwhile, Paulette's image began appearing everywhere, on television, billboards, and public transportation, turning her case into one of the most widely discussed in the country. A few days later, Paulette's mother participated in a televised interview. Sitting in her daughter's bedroom among her toys and belongings, she spoke about her fears. 𝐂𝐨𝐧𝐭 suggested that Paulette's disappearance may have been connected to their family's financial status, and she expressed concern that her daughter could have been taken with the intention of demanding ransom. She made an emotional plea, asking that her daughter be returned safely, even suggesting that Paulette could simply be left somewhere public so she could be found. However, investigators at the time did not view this as a likely explanation. No messages, notes, or calls had been received, and no demands had been made, leading officials to doubt that ransom was the motive. An entire week went by with little progress. Then on March 29th, the Attorney General announced that Paulette's parents and both of her longtime nannies would be questioned more thoroughly. They were moved to a nearby hotel where investigators carried out extended interviews. Officials explained that there had been inconsistencies in the statements provided, which raised concerns. Investigators noted that Paulette's father appeared nervous and somewhat distant, while her mother, 𝐂𝐨𝐭, was described as showing a mix of emotions, sometimes defensive, at other times anxious. Professionals observing her suggested that she came across as reserved and emotionally guarded, though they also emphasized that she was intelligent, capable, and highly perceptive. Although the initial inquiry involved both parents and the household staff, Attorney General Alberto Basbas later stated that 𝐂𝐨𝐭 had become the primary focus of the investigation. Still, he clarified that authorities were continuing to assess the awareness and potential involvement of everyone close to the case. Adding to the concerns around 𝐂𝐨𝐭's behavior was her unexplained absence on March 23rd, the day after Paulette was first reported missing. She and her older daughter were away from the apartment for roughly 7 hours, and details of where they went during that time were never fully clarified. Investigators also obtained private recordings of conversations between 𝐂𝐨𝐭 and her older daughter. In them, 𝐂𝐨𝐭 appeared to caution her daughter about what to say to investigators. At one point, the child asked why, and 𝐂𝐨𝐭 explained that she feared their family might be unfairly blamed. When authorities later confronted her with the recordings, 𝐂𝐨𝐭 initially suggested that the audio had been altered. However, as questions mounted, she shifted her explanation, saying that her words had simply been taken out of context. By March 31st, Paulette had been missing for 9 days. Authorities decided to return to the family's apartment and carefully reconstruct what might have happened. But when they entered the home, something immediately stood out. In Paulette's room, investigators discovered a bundle of bedding tucked between the mattress and the frame. Inside, they found Paulette, who was tragically confirmed to have passed away. The discovery left many unanswered questions. The room had already been searched multiple times by family members, caregivers, police, and even with the help of dogs. Nearly 100 people had stepped in and out of that space during those 9 days. In fact, Paulette's mother had even given a televised interview while sitting on that very bed. Adding to the mystery, 𝐂𝐨𝐭's friend Amanda, who had traveled with her earlier, had been staying in the apartment during the search and had even slept in Paulette's bed. She later told authorities that she made the bed each morning, yet she hadn't noticed anything unusual. This raised difficult questions. How could so many people, including professionals, have overlooked what was later found? Some experts suggested that the way the bedding was arranged may have concealed certain indications, but others argued that it seemed unlikely for Paulette to have been there unnoticed the entire time. With so many people moving through the home during those days, it became nearly impossible for investigators to determine whether her passing had occurred elsewhere or if key evidence had been unintentionally disturbed.
As the case drew intense public attention, authorities released a video that they said was recorded at the time Paulette was discovered. The intention was to show transparency and allow the public to see exactly how she had been found. But instead of providing clarity, the footage raised even more questions. For one, the video appeared to have been filmed around 2 o'clock in the morning, an unusual hour for such a significant search to take place. Viewers also noticed that a forensic specialist made concerning comments about Paulette's condition before even approaching the bed, leaving some to wonder if the footage might have been staged as a reconstruction rather than the original discovery. Adding to the uncertainty, the video seemed to show markings on Paulette's bedding that were difficult to explain. Some observers questioned how Amanda, the family friend who had been staying in the apartment and even sleeping in Paulette's bed, could have missed such noticeable details. So, while the video was meant to demonstrate openness, it only deepened the mystery. Instead of bringing answers, it left the public more confused about what had really taken place in Paulette's room. The Attorney General would later announce that Paulette's passing had been officially ruled accidental, and he insisted that the video released to the public supported this conclusion. According to his statement, investigators believed that the 4-year-old had shifted in her sleep, moved herself toward the foot of the bed, and unintentionally placed herself in a position where she could no longer breathe properly. The medical examination provided additional details. Specialists explained that Paulette had been using an orthopedic cloth at night, something that was reportedly part of her routine to help with her sleeping posture. The report also stated that there were no signs of outside substances in her system, no evidence of interference after her passing, and that her last meal had been several hours earlier. Based on these findings, experts estimated that her passing likely occurred within the very first night she was reported missing. The report also emphasized that there were no indications of outside harm, concluding that her passing was consistent with an accidental situation caused by her own movement in bed. According to this version of events, Paulette had unknowingly placed herself into an unsafe position and tragically did not survive. Investigators added that this explained why she remained undiscovered for several days. But instead of settling the case, the official conclusion left the public with even more questions. Some wondered why the video was recorded at such an unusual hour. Others questioned whether the recreation of events had unintentionally added confusion rather than clarity. And for many, the notion that a child could go unnoticed for that long under those circumstances felt deeply unsettling. In the end, while the Attorney General framed the findings as a clear resolution, the public reaction showed just how divided opinions remained, turning this already heartbreaking case into one of the most debated mysteries in recent memory. Now, the gap between the mattress and the bed frame was only about 6 inches, but given Paulette's small size, authorities considered it possible. To further explore this, police even conducted a recreation to see how such a situation might have occurred. In several photographs taken of her bed after she was reported missing, some observers pointed out that there appeared to be an unusual shape beneath the covers, raising additional questions. Yet one of the biggest mysteries remained. How had the search dogs brought in earlier not detected anything? One explanation suggested by experts is tied to how the search was carried out. When investigators first brought the dogs into the room, they used a pink top sheet from Paulette's bed as a reference scent. The dog quickly led its handler back toward the bed, but the handler redirected the animal, assuming it was simply returning to the source of the reference item. Further details that seemed to support the theory that Paulette may have remained there all along included some concerning findings on the bedding. Investigators noted that a sheet taken from the bed on the morning she was first reported missing had been preserved in an evidence bag. When later examined, it was found to have a stain that matched up with another on the fitted sheet. Similar markings were also noticed on her clothing from that night. Experts later clarified that what had originally been thought to be something more alarming on the bedding could in fact have been natural changes rather than anything else. It was also mentioned that Lizette's friend Amanda, who stayed in the room for several nights, reportedly only slept on top of the blankets with a separate cover rather than underneath the main bedding. This detail was suggested as a possible reason why she might not have noticed anything unusual.
Although Paulette's parents and the family's nannies had initially been taken into custody for questioning, no formal charges were ever filed, and they were eventually released. Over time, tensions within the family began to surface. Mauricio publicly expressed doubts and suggested he had personal concerns about how the situation had unfolded. He even asked Lizette not to attend certain memorial services, stating, "For me, it wasn't simply an accident. I can only speak for myself." At the same time, Lizette voiced her own suspicions toward Mauricio, and their disagreements quickly became public. What many people once saw as a picture-perfect family was revealed to be more complicated. Reports later highlighted that the couple had been experiencing financial challenges, and their marriage was facing difficulties. It was also revealed that Lizette had not accompanied the family on a recent trip, instead spending time with someone she was romantically involved with outside of her marriage. In the aftermath of Paulette's tragic passing, the strained relationship between her parents deepened further, leading to a prolonged custody dispute over Paulette's older sister. In the end, custody was formally awarded to Lizette. Many people continued to express doubts about the parents, particularly Lizette. Not long after, online discussions began to circulate, and one video titled "The Strange Case of Paulette's Pajamas" gained significant attention on social media. The video compared images of clothing shown in interviews with Lizette to the outfit Paulette had last been seen wearing. In one interview, Lizette held up a pair of blue and red reindeer pajamas, which she explained belonged to Paulette's sister. That explanation was plausible, since families often purchase matching sets for their children. However, those same pajamas later appeared among Paulette's belongings, still visible in her closet during subsequent interviews. Adding to the uncertainty, investigators noted that they had not been informed of a second identical pair, leaving open questions about whether another set existed and what may have happened to it. District Attorney Alberto Bazbaz had strongly suspected Lizette's involvement, but despite his efforts, he was unable to present enough evidence to support those claims. Public opinion also began to turn against her, as many viewed her demeanor in interviews as unusually distant for a grieving parent. Some speculated that she wanted to distance herself from responsibility, especially after a comment where she said, "Even if I lose Paulette, I still have another daughter." Lizette, however, firmly rejected these suggestions, insisting that she never saw Paulette as a burden and that such interpretations were deeply unfair. Still, certain remarks added to the perception of detachment. When Paulette was first reported missing, Lizette speculated aloud with unusual comments, such as suggesting she might have been taken by aliens or even a character from Harry Potter. During one interview before Paulette was found, she explained that the nanny had even pulled the sheets from the bed while searching, then gestured toward the foot of the bed. In that same interview, she referred to Paulette as La Niña, the girl, instead of the more personal mi hija, meaning my daughter. While small, these details were noticed by the public and further fueled debate about Lizette's true feelings and possible role in the case. It was later reported that on the very night Paulette was discovered, a security guard recalled seeing a woman enter the apartment complex with a black suitcase. Not long after, there were concerning odors noticed in the area. This detail only added to the growing doubts about how the case had been handled. One of the biggest criticisms was the lack of proper procedure. Investigators had not secured the apartment, and dozens of people were said to have passed through during those critical days. Friends stayed in Paulette's room, and even officers themselves used the adjoining bathroom, something that should never have happened in an active investigation. Critics argued that such oversights made it impossible to determine what really occurred. Some also pointed to the family's connections. Mauricio, Paulette's father, was known to have a good relationship with District Attorney 𝐀𝐫𝐜𝐲. Reports even surfaced that he had allegedly told authorities, "Yes, I know where Paulette is, and I'll explain everything if you can help me. I don't want trouble with the law. I'm desperate."
Even within the forensic process, inconsistencies were raised. When Paulette was first reported missing, the forensic team said they were not permitted to perform a full analysis of the apartment. They were only instructed to look for forced entry, not other potential evidence. Later, when Paulette was found, disagreement arose among coroners about the timeline of her passing. One specialist refused to sign the certificate, insisting the official report was inaccurate, while another admitted he had only signed because that's what the office required. These irregularities painted a troubling picture of the investigation, one where political influence, mismanagement, and lack of transparency overshadowed the search for truth. In Mexico, as critics often point out, those who challenge authorities sometimes risk their careers, and in extreme cases, even their safety. On May 26, 2010, Alberto 𝐀𝐫𝐲 stepped down from his role as Attorney General, explaining that the public's loss of confidence in his handling of Paulette's case had made it difficult for him to continue effectively. It was a moment that reflected both the pressure on authorities and the deep frustration felt by many who followed the case. Paulette was laid to rest on April 6, 2010, at the Panteón Francés in Mexico City, a day marked by sadness but also by remembrance of her short life. For Paulette's loved ones, it was a final chapter in a story that had carried so many unanswered questions, yet also a moment to reflect on her memory with compassion. Paulette's case is one of those stories that leaves more questions than answers. So many steps in the investigation felt rushed or mishandled, and in the end, the truth seems to have slipped through the cracks. For a life lost, that's something that should never happen. It makes me wonder how different things could have been if transparency and accountability had been at the center of this case. But what do you think? Was this a failure of the system or something more? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to see more true crime stories told with honesty and care, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell.